thank you so much for joining us again for Fashion Tech Accelerator for Week 3 course on how the fashion industry is structured. We're really excited to kick off today with both Karen and Michelle. Just wanted to again go through the housekeeping that we are recording all of this. Keep your phones on mute. Enter your questions into the question box on the lower right-hand side of your screen, and we'll answer those questions at the end of the call. If your question is being answered, then you can take your phone off mute and actually pitch in and contribute to any additional questions that you had. Also, we just wanted to say, Kiki, you had the best response. So I don't see you on the call right now, but hopefully you'll watch this later. She had one of the best responses in terms of suggestions to from her compiled research from the usability tests. And you guys did an amazing job with those. And we can go over those more in detail. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to reach out. So without much more ado, I'll pass this over to Karen.
Hi, everybody. So today we're going to be talking about the inner workings of a fashion brand. So I think it's really important for you all. We're talking obviously about fashion tech, but to really understand fashion tech, I guess first we have to understand fashion in and of itself. So we're going to talk about the structure, process, and life cycle within a fashion brand. And every fashion brand is different. They all function differently, but generally a lot of commonality in terms of process and structure. Some of the newer brands have emerged that are direct to consumer, for example, a Bonobos or an Everlane. They will have a different process and a different structure, which is the movement that fashion is heading towards. And they're doing an incredible job at being more nimble and more efficient in how they work. But brands like, a Coach, a DVF, sorry, this is going crazy. The screen that's coming up right now actually is showing my background. So I'll tell you a little bit about the companies that I've worked at and why I'm so knowledgeable about this line of conversation. So I started my career at Coach. I've spent my entire career as a merchandising executive. I'll explain more about what merchandising means in a minute, but started my career at Coach, spent quite a number of years there, and during a really critical time in the brand's history when it was really trying to shift from being a kind of your stodgy, heavy leather purses to, what we think of it today. And so I was there during a really critical period of the company's business, of its process, and its structure evolution. After Coach, I went to Kate Spade and spent some time at Kate Spade where I basically helped launch their merchandising function. So this was a function they had never had before. It was a family-owned business at the time, and they were really looking to grow and expand their processes, expand their structure, their organization, and I came in to really help them do that with their design team. From Kate, I went to a company called Lamberts & Truex, which is unfortunately not around anymore. They were bought by Tiffany, but they were a designer and manufacturer of very, very high-end handbags, crocodile, python, snakeskin, prices ranging from $2,000 to $15,000. And they fell victim to the recession in 2008, but it was an amazing brand at the time, distributed at stores like Bergdorf Goodman, Neiman Marcus. From Lamberts & Truex, I went to Cole Haan, where I was the VP of merchandising for women's footwear and accessories. Cole Haan at the time was owned by Nike, which was, incredible learning. Obviously, Nike is a real powerhouse, so a lot of best practices from Nike were utilized by Cole Haan at the time. And then from Cole Haan, I went to Diane von Furstenberg, and now I am proud to say I am at PreeLine as the co-founder and chief merchandising officer. So I've worked for some amazing brands, and as I was saying, there isn't, certainly one size does not fit all when it comes to the industry and how brands function internally, but there's a lot of commonality. So a lot of what I'll be talking to you about today is based on my experience at these, 5 or 6 brands, and And doesn't mean other brands don't do it a little bit differently, but it should give you all a really good sense of how things work. Okay, so just to talk about the business of fashion a little bit, we think, oftentimes people think of fashion as very frivolous, shallow industry, people wanting to buy pretty things to make themselves feel good about themselves or look good. But really, fashion is a massive business and a tremendous contributor to the world's economy. So, if we think about it as a massive industry, it takes on a different level of importance. The global market, when we talk about fashion, I'm thinking of apparel, accessories, footwear, and other fashion accessories. The global market of about $1.5 trillion, which is just incredible to think of a market that's that big. The U.S. market is about $350 billion, and online is becoming obviously a force and is now about $52 billion was in 2014, about $52 billion in revenue just in the U.S. alone. That for choosing to shop year over year. The largest market in the someone doesn't have their computer muted. If you guys could just take care of that. There's a lot of feedback. Anyway, the three largest markets globally are the EU, which is obviously all the European nations that are part of the EU, the United States, and then China. And China, we know, is a massive growth market for all of fashion. About 75 million people are employed by the fashion industry globally. Again, when we talk about the business of fashion and what an important industry it is, the stat obviously helps reinforce that. And then just a little fun fact about brands. So LVMH, or Louis Vuitton, is the largest fashion brand in the world at about $35 billion. H&M is next at about $17 or $18 billion. So can see the difference between those two brands, LV being double the brand that comes next, shows that LV is definitely a force to be reckoned with, right? Okay, so to start off, I just want to give you all a little bit of grounding on the different functions within a fashion brand. Again, I'm referencing more probably the American contemporary brands. So think about a Rag & Bone, an Alice & Olivia, a Joie, a DVF, a Coach. This is generally the structure within the company and what the different functions within the brand would do. So, and I'm giving this to you, super down and dirty 101, and we'll get into more detail probably as we progress. But the design, I think we all know what design does. They're the creative masterminds behind any new product, so product creation and product concept. Really, obviously, a critical function within a brand and responsible for the things that get consumers emotionally excited when they think of a brand. Merchandising, which is what I've spent my career doing, really acts as the design team's editor. So merchandising is helping design to figure out what to develop into each season based on the business needs. So we function as the design team's editor and right hand, and then we're also the liaison to business units. And business units are retail, wholesale, e-commerce, your international divisions. So merchandising really helps work with the business units to understand, what's working out in the marketplace, what's trending. Let's analyze the current business to help fuel the creative process down the road and to help drive decisions that need to be made. So it's a left brain, right brain function. Within most companies, your merchants are both creative, strategic, and analytical. Marketing and PR. So PR, public relations, is a function within marketing, but thinking about both of these functions under this umbrella of marketing, they're really building the brand image strategy. So responsible for how the brand is perceived in the market, developing ad campaigns, other collateral, communicating through advertising, editorial, celebrity placement, conducting consumer research, planning special events. So marketing departments inside brands are usually really large in most brands because there's actually quite a lot that marketing teams do, and there are a variety of skill sets that come into play within a marketing team. So you'll have, for example, creative services, which is really like your art directors who are helping to manage any creative collateral that comes out of a brand, help set up an advertising campaign. They fall in within the marketing team. So does visual merchandising, who is going into the stores and creating the floor sets, addressing the mannequins, deciding what goes in the window, what goes in the front of store, how are the garments draped by color? Does it go red to blue to black, or is it going to be a mix by print? They're setting the stores. All of that falls within marketing. Product development is the technical arm to design. So they're really helping the design team to execute the vision from a technical perspective. They research materials. They coordinate the procurement of materials, sending them to the factories. They work very closely with the production merchandising teams. They help the design team when samples arrive to measure them and check them to make sure that the factories develop the samples in line with the vision of the designer and the measurements are correct and the materials that they used are what was requested. So, they're really aiding design's process. Production, also highly technical and operational. So usually it's a handoff from the product development team to the production team, and actually often product development and production are under the same team umbrella. They would report into the same person, the head of operations or your head of production. But product development works up front during the sampling process, and production is really working after the product has been design approved. They're helping to get that product manufactured. So they negotiate pricing. They work with the factories very closely to ensure the product is delivered on time, since we know in-store dates are really sensitive for brands. And if you design something for it to arrive in stores in November, it can't arrive in January. You will completely lost your time period for selling that. So production's working really closely to make sure product arrives on time and that it's up to standards and follows design specifications. So they're monitoring the product process on the back end. And then we have sales. So sales teams, it's an in-house team that sells your collection out to external retailers, so to your Nordstrom and Bloomingdale's of the world, or your Shop and Revolves of the world, or your Intermix and Scoop. So it's department stores, it's multi-brand e-commerce sites, it's specialty stores, and the sales teams are getting in front of buyers from these external retailers, and they're trying to sell the dream of the brand that they work for, and get the buyers to support the product that they think, that the brand they think is really important for the season. So they work with these accounts at the time of market, and then they're following up in season to make sure that the product is performing well, that if there's any in-season aid that can be given to the accounts, that's happening. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into process. And then you have your internal buyers. So you would have retail buyers, you would have an e-commerce buyer, you might have international buyers that work with franchisees, and they're determining the investment, the inventory investment for brand-owned stores and websites. So going through the showroom and picking out the product that they feel will perform best within the brand's own environment, a retail store. They allocate inventory to each store location. So if they're buying 100 units of something for a season, 10 of those might go to Dallas, 20 of them might go to Manhattan. They're deciding what and how much inventory goes to each store location based on the demographics of their consumer and how they would respond to any given product. And then they're tracking sales in season for their division. And then you have planning, which is a critical function that's really supporting the sales team and the buyers, developing detailed financial plans, profitability reports, and really focusing on the how much, when, and where for the inventory that's being bought. So they really provide quantitative support to all of these divisions, these business unit divisions. Okay, so we're going to talk about the process life cycle, right? So generally the book kicks off with design and merchandising collaborating together to figure out what the line should look like. So how many new styles do we need? How many new colors do we need? What's trending in the marketplace? And they partner hand in hand to really develop the collection. Oops, sorry. Next, the product gets handed off to product development. They work with the factories to develop samples. And there's a back and forth that happens for a while between design and merchandising and product development. Product development actually then hands it off to sales and buying, and decisions are made about the product that's going to be, the inventory that is going to be bought. Decisions are then made, how much are we going to produce based on how many units we feel we need, and production then manages that process. Then the marketing team steps in to market the product to the consumer in the hopes that they can excite and engage the consumer and get them to buy it when the selling cycle begins. And then, of course, there's the reporting and the analysis that happens once the product hits the floor and you start to see what's selling. Brands start to look at these reports to understand what is performing up to expectation, what is exceeding expectations, and what might be falling short of expectations, and then the whole thing starts again. So from this reporting and analysis, merchandising is then developing their next line plan for the design team, and it just keeps going and going and going. So within a fashion brand, thinking about the skill sets that go into any given function, right? I usually break the teams down into a few buckets. So I talk about the product creation team. So these are the functions that really work on creating product, on developing the product and bringing it to market. So you obviously have design, which is highly creative function, but there is an element of operations that comes with that because they are helping, working with the factories to ensure that the product is developed in their vision, but mainly creative. Product merchandising is creative, strategic, and analytical, not operational. And then you have product development, which there's a little bit of creativity that comes to the fold. A lot of times it depends on the individual themselves and what their skill set might be specifically to them as a person. A little bit of strategy involved, but it's highly operational with some analysis involved as well. And then your production is mainly strategic and operational. A little bit of analytics that comes to play there. So then you go to your marketing teams. So as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of different functions within the marketing team. There's public relations, which is a little bit creative, certainly very strategic, and definitely a little analytical. And the PR teams are really helping with brand image. They're supporting the efforts of the designers in terms of the product that they're putting out there and making sure that it gets onto the backs of the right people, so influencers and celebrities, and that the placement of product in the market is really going to enhance the sales of the product. Strategic marketing is really about communications, the brand's communications out into the marketplace. How is the brand perceived? What types of events do you set up to reinforce that? What are the ad campaigns that you would develop and the vehicles that you would market the product through in order to really capture the attention of the consumer in the marketplace? You have your creative services, which it's a highly, highly creative group. The creative services teams are generally as creative as designers. They really have an incredible ability to, come up with unusual ways to showcase product through print or through video, through visual, and they do a lot of the work that the strategic marketers then put out into the world. The creative services teams are the ones who are brainstorming that and then developing it. Creative services teams would develop a brand's logo, for example, which sounds easy, but it's really technical and complicated. And what does the right font look like for a brand, and the right layout, the right size. They would execute the photo shoots that a brand might have for their lookbook and for their ad campaign. Then you have visual merchandising, which, as I mentioned, that's the stores with the new merchandise that comes in. So does the windows, the mannequins, the layout of the merchandise within the store. They do this for brand-owned stores. They do it for department stores. And again, highly creative group. They're developing and designing really unique props that might communicate a brand's seasonal image. So if your theme is the south of France, they might create this elaborate store window that communicates the south of France to consumers as they walk by. So it's a highly creative group. Consumer insights teams actually fall with marketing. So these are the people that are doing research on how is the consumer responding to the product in the marketplace, doing focus groups. A lot of what PreeLine is doing would be supporting what the consumer insights teams do, which is to learn about the markets and a brand's product so that they can be more successful and grow more quickly. And they are a strategic and analytical group. And then obviously an area that's emerged within the past several years as being critically important within the marketing team is digital marketing and social media. Sometimes this function is managed by the PR team, but it's becoming more and more a separate division because it's becoming so important. And we have our business teams. So planning, as I mentioned before, critical function that's supporting the business and really helping the buyers and the sales teams to make better decisions about how much product to buy, where to allocate it to, comping their numbers from prior seasons, and obviously growing it even beyond that. Sales, we talked about, so more of a strategic analytical. There's definitely an operational element of the sales teams do. Buying and e-commerce, similar. E-commerce is a level of creativity that comes into fold there, but minimal. And then your licensing teams as well, very strategic and very operational. And then lastly, you have your ops teams, so your finance, your IT, your human resources. Finance is more strategic, analytical, and operational. IT generally is purely operational. Unless you have a company that has a large development team, which most brands don't, they really would outsource most of that. So you generally don't have more of a creative, strategic IT team. Much more about the operations. And then your human resources. If they're doing recruiting for your company, there's a level of strategy that's involved with that, and then they're certainly very operational. So, those are the main functions within a fashion brand, and sort of the skills that go with that. I thought it was interesting for you all to, think about if you're thinking of a career in fashion, what works within your skill set and what you're passionate about, and then where it could be, the right home for you within a brand. So the product creation process, really quickly, I'll map out what the process looks like. So the season generally kicks off with merchandising, putting together what's called a line plan, which is basically a map of the season. They do some trend research. They look at what's happening in the marketplace. They're, analyzing business trends for their own brand, and then they're putting together this map for design that says, this is how much new product we need. These are the things we're thinking will carry over from the prior season. These are the price points we have to hit. These are the trends that we're seeing. We're seeing fringe, a huge trend, and we really haven't done very much with it. And, based on in the path we're seeing other brands take, we think it's still going to be important and around, so we really want to develop into it. So they're helping support the design efforts. Design then takes that map, that line plan, and they start conceptualizing the season. They put together color palettes, they put together their print design, any new inspiration that, if the theme is the south of France, what are the colors that tie back to that? What are the things that are meaningful to that theme, and then injecting them into the product concept. All of this has to be reviewed and approved at every step of the way. Design is constantly being monitored by the business teams of the team to make sure that developing it is going to drive the business forward. Have your internal reviews and approvals, and then you go into your something. So a tech pack is basically like an architect's plans. It's what is given to the factory so they know exactly how to develop the product. So if you're thinking of a handbag, for example, every single measurement is given. How tall is the pocket? How long is the strap? Where is the placement of the hardware, from the top of the bag? They give these very detailed measurements. They explain, what materials they want to go where, what colors should go where. So it's really like an architect's plan for the factory. There usually are 2 rounds of samples that happen at prototype, basically, which is, the opportunity for design to really experiment, to perfect the product, and stay with that. So they go through 2 rounds of samples, and then with each of those rounds, you would have a design and merchandising edit. So the samples arrive, merchandising and design sit down together, they go through it. Is this, does this work for us as a brand? Does this achieve our goals? Product development would get pricing from the factories. Okay, is this going to be palatable to the consumer from a pricing perspective? And there's the real strategic meetings that are happening to figure out if the line is actually going to achieve the goals of the brand for the season. Once they've gotten to a place where they feel like the line is in good shape, and sometimes truthfully, you run out of time before you're really ready to feel comfortable, but the calendar is the calendar, and you have to make decisions and sort of go with it. You then place a market sample order. So market samples, market week is basically what you all think of as fashion week, and that's when a brand sets up their showroom with their new collection, buyers come through, they look at the brand, they look at the product, and they pick the things that they like and that they want to put into their stores. So whether it's a department store coming through, a specialty store, or the internal retail buyers, the process is pretty much the same. So market samples get ordered and produced. They arrive at the brand's corporate office or showroom. There's one last edit that occurs, and you weed out the things that aren't working, or maybe you're coming in and they're too expensive, so you have to throw them back into the pot and keep cooking them for another season. You price out the line, and then you get it set up for market. So at that point, the collection would be photographed. The marketing team would get involved. The creative services team photograph the collection for lookbooks. Get PR set up to be able to start socializing to editors what is the product, and get other people excited about it. And then the collection is presented to internal sales teams, and the market week process begins. So that's kind of what the product creation process looks like in a very skeletal way. The production process is running obviously in tandem with this. The real production process starts after the point at which the collection has been presented and buys are ready, but the development team gets involved at the tech pack stage. So when design is conceptualizing the line, the product development team, so I'm looking at the second line here, this production process, right? So the tech packs would be reviewed, and the development team would say, okay, we work with 5 factories, and this garment or this bag would be best allocated to this factory here because they're really good with that type of product. So they make decisions on factory allocations, which factory should make what. They secure sample materials, and then they help design to execute the samples by packing them, answering any questions the factories might have from a technical perspective, and just shuttling the process through. They help with revisions to tech packs, and then the market sample order, which is compiled by merchandising, then gets sent to factories by the development team. Once the market samples are complete, factory costing is received. There's generally big pricing meetings that occur with merchandising. Sometimes the finance team would get involved, the planning team, and you go through and you cost the line to make sure that the price value is really right for the consumer, and that the margins are going to work for the brand, because obviously margin is critical. And then production orders are placed, raw materials are ordered. After that time, the factory is taking the process into their own hands for a period of time. And what they do is there's 2 rounds of additional samples that are done once the production orders are placed. One's called a confirmation sample, and the last is called the top-of-line sample. So confirmation sample is the opportunity for the team to look at the product one last time to make sure that any changes that they've asked to be implemented have indeed been implemented. So it could be from a ready-to-wear, an apparel standpoint. It could be that the sample came in and the skirt on the dress was just way too flared. So they decided to taper it a bit. So they get a confirmation sample to make sure, did the factory actually correct the patterns? Is the dress going to come in and be as the commercial teams had envisioned so that it can really perform? So there's this confirmation sample process for usually almost every garment or every style that is being produced. The factory has to make a confirmation sample, and I like to think of it as almost a contract between the brand and the factory. So it's saying, we're all agreeing this is what it's supposed to look like, and this is what our production better look like. And then right as production is being completed, the factories are supposed to pluck a sample off of the production line, send it to corporate. So let's remember that a lot of the manufacturing is done abroad. So if you're an American brand, a lot of your product is being produced in China or Vietnam or Korea or Europe, maybe. And so it's a long way, it's a far away distance. So the top of line sample is plucked off of the factory line, sent to corporate, and not that there's that much that you can do about it, but the idea is that it should eliminate any surprises so that when production arrives, if indeed there is some sort of manufacturing issue, people aren't caught off guard, and the production team can flag the distribution, the warehouse, to say, look, this came in a little bit different, it's okay, or look, we can't ship this, it's going to have to go directly to off-price. There could be a variety of scenarios. And then once the top-of-line sample process is complete, production is shipped to the warehouse. And then from the warehouse, it's distributed out to stores. And then you have your sales process. So the sales process usually would kick off with some sort of seasonal plan that the planners would help the sales teams and the buyers develop, or we call them open to buys, which is basically saying, for this season, I have $1 million to spend, and then they can figure out what the breakdown of that $1 million should be based on historically what's been successful for a brand. So they develop those plans, and then you go into the internal line presentation. So this is where merchandising, as I mentioned earlier, is presenting the collection after they've gone through their final design edit. They're presenting the collection to the internal teams. From there, these sales teams would go through, and let's say there are 50 styles that are being presented by the merchandising and design team. Maybe the retail team feels like they need 30 of them. So of those 50, they're going to narrow it down to 30, and what are those 30 items that are most appropriate for the consumer who shops at their retail stores, or for e-commerce, it could be a slightly different assortment. So every point of distribution will buy into different items based on who their consumer is and, what's the price sensitivity for that consumer. Maybe you have online, you sell sweaters better than you sell pants, and so you want to have a larger penetration of sweaters within your assortment. So they make selections from the corporate assortment, from what merchandising is presenting, and then they determine what would be best for their stores. Then market week opens, and the sales teams, the teams that are selling out department stores and specialty stores, they have to do their dog and pony show. So they basically are either at trade shows or in the brand showroom, and buyers are coming through. So the Bloomingdale's teams, the Nordstrom teams, the Intermix teams, they're coming through and walking through the showroom, and the sales teams, the account executives are presenting the line. They are, as I said, selling the dream, trying to be super passionate and enthusiastic about the new collection, really trying to get these buyers engaged, because the buyers are the middleman for them between the brand and the consumer. So they really, really need these stores to be excited about the product, to hopefully buy the things that the brand feels is most important for the season. After the buyers have come through, orders are submitted, both from the external buyers and the internal buyers. So you then aggregate your total company orders. So merchandising generally or planning would look at what are the total company orders, how do they add up. Maybe you would say, okay, we thought this dress was going to be our number one. We feel as though people didn't buy enough of it, and we're going to add another 15% onto these aggregated orders so that we have enough merchandise in season to drive replenishment orders. So that there are decisions that are made based on how the total company orders are rolling up, and then production orders are placed. The sales team then would confirm any cooperative advertising with their accounts. So Bloomingdale's might decide that they're going to showcase a certain dress in their catalog, and the sales team is responsible for that negotiation. What's the item? How much is it going to cost? It's called cooperative advertising because usually the brand pays for part of it and the stores pay for part of it. And then from there, sales teams are tracking the arrival of goods to the warehouse, helping visual merchandising, tracking weekly sales, and making recommendations for replenishment or swaps. So if something ends up not performing well, they might suggest that the department store or the specialty store return it, and they'll give them something in its place to sell instead, and then analyzing the sales. So that's your sales process. So really quickly, I'm going to run you through what a calendar, what a development calendar, production calendar looks like, so you can understand how long this all takes. And I used fall 2016 as the example. Again, every brand is different, so this is a general calendar for a brand. Some brands might take longer, some brands might be able to turn it around in a little bit less time, but generally brands that are selling to their own stores, their own e-commerce, department stores, they would have a similar calendar. So you start off, you kick off the season about 12 months before the product is delivered to stores. So it takes almost a full 12 months to plan, design, develop, sell, and produce the product before it hits the stores. So you'd have your merchandising line review, let's say August 1st for fall 16. You give the design team about 6 weeks to conceptualize and start to develop into any new styles. Then it takes about a month for your first sample round to be produced. And then there's about 2 weeks worth of internal meetings that occur. The samples arrive, merchandising and design look at them, and then product development and design turnaround corrections to the factories. Now, this is super interesting. So we're talking about the development of fall 2016 here, right? You've just submitted your design corrections to the factories on November 2nd, but then on November 10th, you're analyzing your fall 2015 season. So you're developing the next year's comp season, and you're just having the opportunity to analyze what's happened in this fall. And so you start to see, this is where a lot of brands struggle because they're making really important decisions a year out before they really even know how the comp season's product is going to perform. Then you have about a month after you've submitted corrections, you have your second round of samples that are complete. Again, about a week for the merchandising team, or a week and a half for them to decide what they're going to place in market sample orders, and then the design team can go into corrections. It takes about 6 weeks for the factories to make market samples. Market samples, there are hundreds of market samples that are generally made for any given season. So it's actually like a mini production. So you can see here, February 1st, that the market samples are complete. You then go through about 2 weeks of internal meetings and presentations. If it's a runway show type brand, they would have their runway show then mid-month, and then the next day their market would open and all their buyers would start coming through. They'd have about 2 weeks then to show the collection, get all of their buys completed, and then place their production orders. ad campaign would then be shot about 2 months later, and then the product would ship from the factory. If you can look back and see, about 3 months after the production orders have been completed is when the product would ship from the factory. Then your marketing campaign would launch about 2 weeks before the product would arrive in stores. So the marketing team starts to engage the consumer and get them excited about the product, and then the collection launches in stores. So pretty amazing if you think about the fact that it takes about a year to go through this whole process to get the product in store for these traditional brands. It's extraordinary, and explains why a lot of these brands can't be as nimble as they need to be with their collections, because their lead times are just so long. So before I give it over to Michelle, I just wanted to give you some fun facts about the industry, and then Michelle's going to talk a bit about digital marketing and social media. But so a runway show could cost upwards of $500,000 to produce, and that's kind of a basic one. I mean, Chanel's runway show probably costs over $1 million, and runway shows last about 12 minutes. So you spend all that time and all that preparation for about 12 minutes. Traditional fashion brands, we talked about, need about 12 months to design and develop and conceptualize a product, get it to stores. Zara, which is obviously a fast fashion brand, does this in about 2 months for 75% of their collection. So maybe 25% of their collection they're planning out 6 months in advance. The rest of it, they're just turning that around in 6 weeks to 2 months, because they're that nimble, and their operational setup is so vertical and smart that they're able to make decisions and produce product really quickly, design and produce product. Traditional fashion brands are working on 3 collections at the same time that are in various stages of the development cycle. So it is never ending. An ad in Vogue costs about $100,000. That's probably a 1-page ad. Apparel samples for a showroom are usually made in a model size 2 or 4, which is kind of a skinny 2 or skinny 4. And then the production team has to rework the entire fit for commercial purposes. So they make all of these samples that are actually not in the right measurements for commercial purposes, and then they have to redo the whole thing. And just thinking about a vertical retailer versus a multi-distribution retailer, a sweater that would retail for $100 at J.Crew probably costs them about $25 to make. You can see how much they make on a given item if it's sold at full price, of course. And then that similar sweater from like Alice and Olivia, who has wholesale distribution, e-commerce distribution, specialty store distribution, would retail for about $125, because they obviously don't make the full markup. They have to establish a wholesale price to sell to their wholesale partners. So just some fun things for you to think about when you think about the fashion industry. So we're going to turn it over to Michelle.
Hello, everybody. Sorry in advance for my raspy voice. I'm just getting over a really bad head cold. But I'm really excited to talk to you and give you the long story short on social media, because let's be real, we could talk for hours about it. There's just so much. A little bit of my background. I'm currently the digital project coordinator at Kind Snacks, the Kind bars. Previously, I was the marketing and e-commerce associate at a company called Of a Kind. And what Of a Kind is they tell the stories and sell the pieces of emerging fashion designers, and are really great. And if you haven't heard of them, you should go Google them after this call, because they're just wonderful and have a lot of great insights to emerging designers that you probably haven't heard of yet. And before that, I had internships at Mara Hoffman and Days, Another Man magazines in London. So the big question on what your mind should be is, why as a brand should you care about social media? And the answer in the simplest forms is that it's where your customer is. Your customer is eating, breathing, and living on social media. Think about how many devices you're logged into: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Vine, Tumblr. I guarantee at one point in time you're logged into at least 2 or 3 different social media outlets on any of your devices. So, long story short, that's where they're going to get you. That's where you're going to reach your people. That's where you're going to really connect with your core market. And the way to do that is to really do it well and figure out who you want to talk to, how you want to talk to them, and what you want to say. And I figured the easiest way to go through this was to highlight some of the brands that I think are doing it really well. And the first brand that I think is doing it an excellent job is Warby Parker. If you don't know what Warby Parker is, they are a company that sells glasses for $99, prescription and non-prescription. And they do a really excellent job on social of working their product into very innovative settings that, it's not just a pair of glasses sitting on a desk. They have that, but they have, versatility. They're using dogs as glasses. It's adorable. They're using pies to make it feel seasonal. They're showing people, what they want to see. I have a little note to myself to say, if my current boss were here, he would say dogs and food are internet cheating because they always garner more likes. But you got to give people what they want. Dogs and food will always perform really well on social if it's a really beautiful photo, because as you're scrolling, it's just what people instinctually click on and stop and look at. Another brand that I think does it really well is Club Monaco. Something with Club Monaco that they've really mastered is that they have a very specific lifestyle that they're going after. And so all of their photos, regardless if it's of their actual product or of something like coffee that really has nothing to do with their brand, feels on brand. It feels like it's a part of their lifestyle, it's a part of their story, and you understand it. Another thing that they do really well, if you look at this first photo of the shoes, is behind the scenes type photos. People love to see how products are made, especially at big brands like Club Monaco, where, it's the same product in Oklahoma as it is in California. People love seeing how that pair of shoes is made, what, is going on behind the scenes, and how it's getting to the shelves. Another brand that does it excellently is Refinery29, and something that I highlighted here that they really, really do a good job of is customer interaction. I think it's really important when having social media as an extension of your brand to remember that it is an extension of your customer experience. It's a form of customer service. You will inevitably get interactions on both ends of the spectrum, whether good or bad, and you really have to be prepared to roll with the punches and engage your consumer. So you can see the example on Twitter is Refinery, being fun and playful with someone tweeting about the new Adele song. It's a way to make it feel like you're an approachable brand, you're an approachable presence on social media. Another thing that Refinery has really, really gotten the hang of is videos. And now with autoplay videos on Facebook, they are killing the game, let me tell you. Autoplay videos are one way to really get someone engaged, because as they're scrolling through, it just automatically plays. So the views are much higher than they used to be when you used to have to stop and click out of Facebook. They're playing right there. You're having a really quick interaction with someone, and then they can keep going, but then it'll stay at the top of their mind, and it's a great way to reach people with relevant information. This was a video of a Halloween costume that would I have stopped and clicked on it to see? Probably not, but because it auto-played, I watched it until the end. It gets you in at a really quick little bite, and then you stay for more. Another brand that does social really well and, just does lifestyle in general really well is J.Crew. They have really established a distinctive look and feel to what the J.Crew lifestyle is and make you feel a part of the community through their social channels. So, whether it's giving the brand a face like they have with Jenna Lyons, and giving a look and a person to associate with the brand, or giving backstage views of if you're showing at Fashion Week and the average consumer is not going to be able to have access to that, giving them a sneak peek of in the minute what's happening, here's what's going on in our community, you're a part of this, you have the inside look. And another thing that J.Crew does really well that you'll see, I just took a screenshot of their entire Instagram feed. They have mastered having a consistent filtering technique on all of their photos. You can look at their photo stream, and every photo seems like it's a part of one story, regardless of if it's shoes or leaves. It feels cohesive. It feels conjoined because of the coloring behind it, and that's something really important, I think, to keep in mind when creating your brand voice is also figuring out what your look and feel is. Another brand that does customer interactions very well is Gap. You can see I screenshotted, this is an example from Facebook. They are responding with a first name to everybody within, it looks like 24 hours of when the person originally wrote in, not leaving people hanging, not leaving people with a sour taste in their mouth, because 9 times out of 10, regardless of what the problem is, people will feel more at ease just by being reached out to. And sometimes you can turn that customer experience around and have them then either delete or, repost something that says, that was really great, or their customer service is great, they reached out. It's all about wanting to reach them where they are and give them the best customer experience possible, and social is really a way to do that. So Burberry is another brand. They do a really good job on Twitter of taking advantage of popular hashtags and, getting in the mainstream. They had hashtag Music Monday, hashtag Now Playing. The use of hashtags really allows, you to join a bigger conversation that's outside of your community, outside of just your narrow group of followings, and allows you to be found by people who may not have stumbled upon you otherwise. Another thing that they do really well to keep in mind is on all of their product-related tweets, you'll see in the middle, they have a call to action. Explore at Burberry Bags for women, or discover shoes from Burberry. They're giving someone a concrete action to do rather than just saying, hey, look at this really pretty bag. You need to give someone, what do you want them to take from this? Do you want them to shop this collection? Do you want them to view this bag? Do you want them to share this tweet to their friends? You need to formulate in your mind what you want the purpose of that tweet or post or picture is, and figure out a succinct and engaging way to communicate that with your audience. The last thing that I had as an example from them is that they not only are really good about showcasing their products, but also showcasing their product in a way that seems useful to their consumers. So this is a bandana scarf tutorial. It gives them, it's an approachable way to say, hey, here's something that is useful for you as a consumer, regardless of if it's using our product or using a different scarf. This is just a cool way to tie it. But by the way, we're using our product. It looks really beautiful. This looks really natural. You'll probably love this way with this scarf if you can. And another example I had was Everlane, who I couldn't take any Snapchat, or I couldn't take any screenshots of them on Snapchat, but they do a really good job on their Snapchat account of walking the consumer through a day-to-day of an Everlane employee or day-to-day of an Everlane product. They do really, really beautiful jobs of showcasing not only their warehouses, but their manufacturing and their offices, and also just showing their products in really fun ways. That, they do really beautiful cashmere products, and showing this fun picture of someone with 10 pounds of cashmere is just a fun and engaging way for someone to, feel a part of the brand without having to always just look at product. It's mixing it up and giving someone diversity, but also, as you can see, looking and feeling consistent across all of their photos, as you can see in the snapshot of their thing. They also, they're filtering consistently. They're using similar light, similar muted colors, similar tones, making sure it all feels like one cohesive unit. And that is all that I had.
But thank you so much, Michelle, for joining us today, and thank you, Karen, for an amazing presentation. Yeah, we'll see you guys again next week. It'll be a good week.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.